everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Hope you guys are doing well. Back at it with another video. We're going to be talking more about my astrology series. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let me know, what rising sign are you, and do you feel like you resonate with the description that I'm kind of giving you guys today? And do you find this information helpful? Well, I'm here creating some continuing education content for you. I want to bring you guys more of that so you can better understand your natal chart. If this inspires you to want to learn more, check out my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com, where I teach astrology. I have Astrology 101 for beginners and Astrology 201 to understand the transits. All right, so I'm calling this video Unleash Your True Self, Understanding the First House and Your Ascendant in Astrology. So if you guys caught my video on Tuesday, we did a profile on the archetype of the sign of Aries. Now we're going to break it down even further, and we're going to take a look at what the first house in astrology really means. Obviously, to understand your full horoscope, you have to be able to know your exact time, date, and location of birth. Putting this information into an astrology calculator will be able to tell you what your ascendant sign is. This is also known as the rising sign, and it is on the 9 o'clock hour of your chart. Now, the first house in astrology is often referred to as the house of self. It represents the individual, their physical appearance, and also their approach to life. And the cusp of the first house is known as the ascendant or rising sign. And this is the zodiac sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the exact moment of your birth. Now, this sign plays a significant role in shaping the personality of how others perceive the individual. Equally, I believe that the ascendant sign is what you have come in this lifetime to embody. So you're kind of showing this through your ascendant in how you look, how you act, how people kind of perceive you, and it's also about the relationship to the self. Now, the first house is important because it's all about your personal self-expression, your identity, and how you present yourself to the world. It reveals a lot about your personal appearance, your style, and the first impression that you make on other people. Additionally, the first house can provide insight into your own personal self-awareness, your self-confidence, and your ability to assert yourself in various situations. Actions and themes connected to the first house include self-discovery, personal growth, and the development of your identity. It also encompasses the individual's physical body, vitality, and overall health. The first house is associated with new beginnings, as it represents the start of an astrological wheel and the journey of self-discovery that each person embarks upon. Planets in the first house greatly influence a person's personality and how they express themselves. For example, Mars in the first house may indicate a strong drive and assertiveness, while Jupiter in the first house could indicate somebody is very optimistic and expansive in their personality. The sign on the cusp of the first house also plays a crucial role in shaping your individual self-expression and your outward appearance. This is also the first house, which has that kind of connection traditionally with Aries, that is about the first breath that you take, right, of life, how you were born and what you're coming into. So the ascendant in the first house is so incredibly important because it's a very action-oriented house, regardless of the sign that it is. And when I think about the ascendant or the rising sign, I think about how in Hellenistic astrology, it's considered the helm because it represents the cusp of the first house in the chart, and it's considered to be one of the most important angles in your natal horoscope. Now, the ascendant is the point at the eastern horizon where the sun would rise at the exact moment and location of your birth, and it's considered the starting point of the astrological houses and sets the foundation for the entire chart. So with that being said, astrologers, when we write horoscopes, even though I know so many people in modern day times have been programmed to listen to their sun sign, astrologers write our horoscopes based off of the zodiacal order. So you want to get into the habit of not just reading your sun sign horoscope, you actually want to be reading your rising sign first, because it's going to be depicting where planets are going to be moving based off of the zodiacal order in the transits. Now, the ascendant for me also represents like the mask that we wear in public, whether this is like a first impression we give to other people, or maybe it's what we'd want to present to somebody like on a first date or a job interview. and it's how we project ourselves in the world. So it's the lens in which we view the world and how the world sees us. The ascendant is so important because it influences our personality, our appearance, the way that we relate to other people, and it has a huge impact on our look, and it influences our physical appearance, our body, our style, and our overall demeanor. So the sign on your ascendant can give you clues about your physical characteristics, such as your facial features, your body type, and your general appearance. It can also influence your personal style, including the way that you dress and present yourself to other people. There's also connections to personal style in the second house as well. In the following information, I want to talk a little bit about the various 12 rising signs and the importance of that, what to look for, and what I have noticed with the 12 rising signs. And then we'll also talk about planets in the first house and how they behave and how that's going to serve as like a mini archetype for that particular planet. So we're going to start first with the first sign of the zodiac. We're going to talk a little bit about Aries and Aries rising specifically. When I think about Aries rising, right, so this is the first sign of the zodiac. Obviously, it's in the first house, which it's natally kind of associated with. This is ruled by Mars, okay? So Mars is your chart ruler if you're in Aries rising. Traditionally, I see Aries risings have a very strong physical appearance. Sometimes they can have more of an athletic or muscular build, and they may have more of like a prominent forehead or a well-defined upper body or muscular arms, because Mars deals with strength. So having that as your chart ruler and having Aries in the first house, there's going to be a little bit more of like an athletic build. They're known for physical strength and endurance, so it's not uncommon to see people who have defined muscles or toned, or they just might be a little bit more naturally athletic looking. And their personality traits are known for being energetic, courageous, and assertive. Remember, Aries is a fire sign. So they have a tendency to be quick moving, very passionate, and sometimes a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I often notice also that it is possible that we will see more of like a reddish hue to their features, whether that is like warmer eye color or warmer hair. Sometimes we'll see a little bit more of a flushed face. And when we look at the ascendant sign, something else that I should mention is that we don't just look at the sign, we also look at the degree and the planetary ruler and its placements. So just because you're an Aries rising, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have red hair, but let's say you happen to have an Aries rising at 1 degree or 13 degrees, or any of the Aries degrees, it may have much more of like an Aries energy to it. So you have to think about the degrees as well as the ruling planet. So if you are an Aries rising, it's also equally important that you're looking at where Mars is in your horoscope, both the house that it's placed in as well as the sign, and then look at how it's aspected to the ascendant. Now, when we think about Taurus and Taurus risings, right, because they're ruled by Venus, Venus is going to be your planetary placement, your ruler. So you want to look at where Venus is, where it's placed by house and sign, and how it's aspected. But I find that Taurus rising people, generally from their physical appearance, it includes a very strong or prominent neck, because that's what Taurus rules, and shoulders as well. They have a tendency to have a peaceful or calm demeanor. Their personality traits include being patient, practical, and sensual. They're naturally beautiful because they're children that are connected to Venus. Generally, I can find a Taurus rising pretty easily. They smell good. They tend to have a very beautiful or distinguished voice, or they'll have like a really noticeable or distinguished tone to their voice. And they happen to be a little bit shorter in height. And because Taurus is associated with luxury and beauty, it's often that you'll see them like wearing jewelry. So they'll have like necklaces, sometimes bracelets, and they're kind of more of like an earthy energy. So you will notice that they might be more naturally kind of beautiful or attractive without having to have like all like the extras that they're wearing, makeup or extensions or colored hair. They tend to be very naturally beautiful. Now, when we look at Gemini risings, obviously Gemini ruled by Mercury, you're going to want to look at where Mercury is in your natal chart. What sign is it in? What house is it in? And how is it aspected? Gemini risings are interesting because I see them as like chameleons. They can definitely change their style and their look a lot. Their physical appearance includes very expressive eyes, and they have a tendency to have a more slender build. Gemini rising individuals usually have a smaller body, and they're agile, and they have longer limbs, and they're very flexible. They're known for their quick movements and their dexterity. Personality traits include being more communicative, curious, and adaptable. Longer fingers, longer arms and limbs, and a constantly changing style. You may also find that they're rather chatty, and I find that because Mercury is associated with Gemini risings, they often have a tendency to stay youthful. They always look very young and inquisitive, regardless of their age. Now with Cancer risings, obviously Cancer is ruled by the moon, so you want to look at your moon placement, both which house and which sign it's in and how it's aspected. This is your chart ruler. When I think about Cancer risings, they have a tendency to have a rounder face with expressive eyes. Cancer risings often have a soft and round body, but they can have a very gentle and nurturing appearance. They may have a tendency to gain or fluctuate with their weight, but their overall demeanor is still very youthful, very beautiful, and their traits tend to be more nurturing, sensitive, and intuitive. The way that I generally spot a Cancer rising is they'll sometimes have a lighter complexion, like a milkier or like a little bit of a cooler kind of tone of complexion, regardless of their race. They often have a fluctuating face. So when you think about the moon kind of goes from full to being dark, right? So their face may change from time to time. You may also notice that they have a little bit more of like a moon face. They can sometimes have a little bit more of a prominent chin. Kind of like the moon when you think of like a crescent moon. And their eyes too, they have a tendency to kind of have these like kind of like puppy eyes. They can be softer eyes and like very emotional in their expressions. And when I think about a Leo rising, obviously Leo is ruled by the sun. So you want to look at where your sun is placed because that's your chart ruler. What sign and house is it in? And how is it aspected? Now the sun is opposite to the moon, so it's going to be more masculine. It's also going to be more dynamic. The physical appearance for a Leo rising tends to have more of a regal kind of bearing, strong mane of hair, big hair, curly hair. They may have fuller hair, and they tend to have a very strong and well-proportioned body. And a very confident posture. I've noticed that sometimes Leo risings have very prominent shoulders and like back muscles because Leo has connections not just to the heart but also to the back. And they'll sometimes have a little bit more of like a triangle kind of shaped body where their shoulders are a little bit more broad. And you can always tell a Leo rising because they kind of walk with like a little bit of like a swagger, like kind of like the king of the jungle, like a lion. So they'll kind of walk very confidently and shift their shoulders. And they're known for their charisma and their natural leadership abilities. Personality traits include being very confident, charismatic, and creative. Something else you want to watch for other than their hair and their walk is also they may have a tendency to have a little bit of like a flatter nose and a feline face. So you'll notice that they'll have like eyes that might be a little bit more cat-like. You might also notice that they have warmer features or golden features in their hair. Really distinct brows as well is something else that I notice. And they also have a tendency to have a very distinguished voice. Obviously, Leo is connected to a lion, so we can kind of hear them get very kind of boastful, or they might kind of roar a little bit in how they communicate. Now, when I think about Virgo risings, because Virgo is also ruled by Mercury, just like Gemini, they may have some similar characteristics. You want to look at where Mercury is placed in your chart, what sign, and also what house and how it's aspected. Virgo rising is a little different than Gemini. You're going to notice that they have a little bit more of a delicate build and a modest demeanor. People with Virgo risings tend to have a more delicate and slender body and a key eye for detail and a meticulous approach to their appearance. They're often health conscious and strive for physical balance. Personality traits include being detail-oriented, analytical, and health conscious. I find that Virgo risings have a tendency to have a little bit more of like a pointed nose. Oftentimes you'll see them looking over their glasses and you'll kind of see them like look at you with their eyes, they'll kind of like give you that judgmental kind of look. And I also noticed that a lot of Virgo risings tend to have a widow's peak. That's something that's pretty common that I've seen with clients. What else? And chatty as well, although they're going to be a little bit more conservative than Gemini rising. Kind of like a smaller body, and it's kind of like boxy. And you'll notice that they have long, slender legs and arms. But also these are the ones that have a tendency to kind of have their appearance a little bit better together than most other rising signs. Very particular with what they wear, how they comb their hair. They may opt for colors that are going to be a little bit more in earth tones. And I've noticed that some Virgo risings have a tendency to have like a go-to almost like uniform for what they wear. So if they find something that they like, they'll buy a lot of the same kind of outfits in different or like muted colors. And it'll be something that's just like, yeah, it's something that's like a little bit more conservative sometimes in their appearance. Now for Libra risings, obviously Libra risings are ruled by Venus. So you want to look at your natal Venus placement, which house and what sign is it in and how it's aspected. Libra risings, like Taurus, are blessed by Venus, so they sometimes do have a tendency to be very beautiful. Their appearance includes a well-proportioned body and a charming smile. Libra risings usually have a very balanced and harmonious body, so regardless of the size, you'll notice that they definitely have a really well-defined shape because Venus rules their chart. So if they're a woman, they're going to have more defined feminine features, but generally symmetrical and appearing and a pleasing appearance. And they're known for their grace and as well as their love of beauty and aesthetics. Personality traits include being diplomatic, fair-minded, and relationship-oriented. Something I've always noticed about Libra risings is they have a tendency to want to have everything symmetrical. Eyebrows, hair, elements, they want to balance everything out in what they're wearing. They have a tendency to have a good eye for what colors like go well together, and they're really great sometimes when it comes to design. But Libra risings, it's funny, they do have a tendency to have a little bit more like of a doe-eyed look. And they also have a tendency to have a little bit more of a, because it's an air sign, sometimes some like masculine features to their face. And they're obviously, I can say this is Libra rising, they're not the most graceful, believe it or not. Libra risings, they may kind of move around and they look like this pretty thing, but they can have a tendency to be like a little clumsy. So that's something else that you might notice with Libra risings. For Scorpio risings, you're ruled both by Pluto as well as Mars. So you want to look at both of these placements. Traditional astrology says Mars rules your chart, and modern astrology is Pluto. So you can look at one or both of them, depending on which one you prefer. You want to look at the house that they're in and the sign that they're in and the aspects. Scorpio risings are interesting. They have a tendency with their physical appearance to have very obvious piercing eyes. Okay, you can always tell by a Scorpio rising based off of their gaze. Sometimes they'll give you a little bit of like a standoffish vibe. They can also be very magnetic in their presence because, you know, they're ruled by Pluto and Mars, so they can be seen as somebody who is very hypnotic. A very strong body as well, compact, usually on the shorter side. And they tend to have darker features. So even if it's not their hair, sometimes it can be their brows or even their eyes. Something else that I've noticed also is like Scorpio is a sign that is associated and ruled by the underworld. So they can tend to have like a darker preference with clothes and materials. They also can have, you know, sexy features or a body that is, you know, kind of like an ideal form. They can have definitely this alluring sense to them with their sensuality. And their personality traits include obviously being intense, but also very passionate and secretive. They are very private people. Generally, they won't offer up a lot of information. They'll ask a lot of questions, and they can sometimes be seen as dark and brooding. Now for Sagittarius risings, you're ruled by Jupiter. So you want to look at your natal Jupiter placement, both the place that it is, which house it's in, as well as the signs and the aspects. You know, Sagittarius risings are some of my favorite people. Obviously their physical appearance can be a little bit more athletic because it is a fire sign, but they generally have this big grin on their face. Sometimes when they smile or when they laugh, you'll always see their teeth. That's one way that you can kind of catch a Sag rising. And they're cheerful in their demeanor. You'll see them laughing all the time. Because they are kind of like the jokers of the zodiac. And they're, you know, typically they have longer legs or well-defined hips and thighs or a backside. And they have a love for adventure and exploration. And their personality traits include being adventurous, optimistic, very philosophical. I find that Sag risings tend to be on the taller side. I always can spot a Sag rising because they have this like very kind of traveler, bohemian look to them. You know, they'll be wearing loud colors and prints sometimes, or things that are very much culturally kind of associated for them. You may also find that they are not wearing shoes. That's a pretty common thing that I see with Sag risings. For whatever reason, you know, they like to travel light, and they're either wanting to wear sandals, or they'll be walking around barefoot because they like to kind of be out in the elements. And sometimes they'll have longer hair. When we think of like Sagittarius and like the centaur, you know, it's half man, half horse. So it's common for them to have really long hair, or a ponytail, or even men to have a little bit like longer, you know, hair, or hair that's pulled back. And everything's big because they're ruled by Jupiter. So they'll like big, loud prints, or things that are going to be, yeah, just bigger, sometimes in size also. That's something that I'll notice. And because they are ruled by Jupiter, I find that they tend to be on the taller side with like thicker defined legs and thighs, or they will have a tendency to fluctuate with their weight as well because they're ruled by Jupiter. Now, when I think about Capricorn and Capricorn rising, ruled by Saturn, so you want to look at your natal Saturn placement, both by sign and house, and how it's aspected. Capricorn rising are also some of my favorite people. Sometimes you guys get a bad rap for being too serious, or for being a bit grumpy. But I think when I think about your physical appearance, something that always comes up for me a lot with Capricorn is a really strong defined bone structure. Whether that's your jaw, or you know, your cheeks, or you know, just anything with your bones in your face. It's very well kind of chiseled, and you may seem like you have like a more refined or serious demeanor. But people with Capricorn rising have a strong and generally a pretty disciplined body, and you're really focused on achievement and being able to get going with your goals. You may be a little grumpier in the morning, or you may opt for styles that are going to be a little bit more refined and traditional. You guys are known for being ambitious and determined, and disciplined as well. Something I notice also with Capricorn risings is sometimes they can have a tendency to wear more traditional old-fashioned styles, or they'll wear outfits that have this kind of like almost like uniform-esque look to it, or they'll opt for things that is going to show the definition in their body, or things that will have like natural elements because they're an earth sign. But a giveaway for me for Capricorn risings is generally really, really nice skin, believe it or not. And I also find that as they get older, they become more attractive. So you kind of like Benjamin Button syndrome. You guys will like, as you're growing up, you're like, oh, I can't wait to finally look old. And then as you get older, you'll actually start to look a little bit younger. Same with Scorpio risings. They can have that as well. And ears, that's something else I noticed with Capricorn risings. Maybe it's because I think of like the goat, but I noticed that some Capricorn risings may have a little bit more of a point to their ears. So when I'm doing like chart rectification for clients, I'll look for certain physical characteristics to kind of determine which hour they're born in. And I'll look at the profile of Capricorn risings, and if they have a little bit more of a point to their ears, sometimes that can be a dead giveaway for me. Now with Aquarius risings, this is a sign that's ruled both by Saturn as well as Uranus. So you want to look at both of these placements in your chart, both the sign as well as the house, and how they're aspected. I find that the physical appearance is generally very unique, whether that's in their style or their facial features. Aquarius risings tend to have a very unique and unconventional body, and a free-spirited, independent approach to life. They're known for their creativity and their ability to think outside the box. And personality traits include being independent, inventive, and a humanitarian. With no doubt of mind, like Aquarius risings always look very unique and unusual, sometimes almost a little like etheric in a way. I find that they may have much more defined face and jawbone, and they can also just look otherworldly, as weird as it sounds. They'll have very unique characteristics in their face that almost makes them look not so human. I know that sounds kind of weird, but When I think of, you know, Uranus being something that's like unconventional and like different, they will definitely have a very modern and kind of striking appearance. And sometimes it can be something that kind of blends between masculine and feminine energies. So that's another thing that you'll kind of see with Aquarius risings. Also, you'll notice that sometimes they're the ones wearing the loudest prints, the strangest, most unconventional outfits, things that are the most modern, or things that are going to kind of catch people's attention because they're different, right? They're ruled by Uranus and they kind of go against the grain. They will bring in some of those Saturn kind of energies as well, though, where there is a tendency to focus on being, you know, stern and mature. But I really feel like Aquarius plays into it, where they're kind of like these innovators and they want to be doing things that are very different. You may find that they are the trendsetters of the zodiac also, and so they may start wearing something or doing something before other people catch on. And then we have our Pisces risings, traditionally ruled by Jupiter, and your modern day ruler is Neptune. So you want to be looking at both of these placements, both which house it's placed in, as well as the sign that it's in and the aspects that it makes. Now, the physical appearance for my Pisces risings, generally a soft and ethereal body. They have a very dreamy and gentle appearance, and they're known for their compassion and spiritual nature. Personality traits include being compassionate, imaginative, and spiritual. But something that I've noticed about Pisces risings is they have a tendency to have these like beautiful hands. Sometimes they'll have longer fingers. Sometimes they'll also have like a little bit of like a lighter complexion, regardless of their ethnic background. And something else that I notice about them a lot also, it sounds weird, is their teeth. There's definitely like a Pisces rising thing with the teeth, where you can kind of tell because the teeth may be a little crooked. Sometimes there's some jaggedness to it naturally before, you know, there would be any ortho intervention. I sometimes see this with Virgo risings as well. Virgo risings and Pisces definitely have really defined teeth. Pisces are going to be more jagged. Virgo is going to have a tendency to be a little bit more buck in the front. It's funny, I call it fish teeth, but it's definitely something that I've seen. And equally, they can have these further kind of spaced eyes. They can have eyes that are almost like fish-like, that have more of like a almond shape to them or a little bit further apart. And they can have very beautiful features. When I think about the connection to Neptune, definitely like their eyes can be something that really kind of catches you. Sometimes they have some really prominent eye color. When I think of the connection to Jupiter, I think about the feminine nature of Jupiter in Pisces and how it's this kind of like dreamy, you know, whimsical kind of creative energy. They can almost be like little fairies in how they dress, or they have like this like glow about them in photos or in like videos. And you can also sometimes tell they may also have feet that are longer and a little bit more narrow. That can be something else that you can notice with Pisces placements. So these are just a few of the things that I see with the rising signs, both physically as well as their personalities. But when we look at planets in the first house, this is a completely different ballgame. Because when planets are in the first house, they're like a little mini archetype of that particular planet. Especially if it's within a few degrees of the ascendant. So if it's in your first house, and let's say it's within about 5 degrees or so of your ascendant, it's definitely going to have a huge impact on your personality and also on your appearance. And that energy is expressed through the sign of the ascendant. Now, I want to go through the planets in the first house just to give you some insight as to how this may manifest for your chart. Let's say you have the sun in the first house. For me, this is like that person walks in the room and you can see them energy, right? Very vibrant, very confident, self-assured, and has a strong sense of self. Generally, these are people who are natural born leaders, and they're often the center of attention in social situations. Because the sun shines bright, right, and all the other planets revolve around the sun in the first house can be somebody who is incredibly charismatic, very creative, and really kind of demands the center of attention when they walk in a room. Now, when I think about the moon in the first house, right, this has connections and associations with Cancer traditionally, but the moon is more about your emotional body, and some may see this as wearing your heart on your sleeve. The moon in the first house is usually very in tune with their emotions and can be quite sensitive or even empathic. They often have a nurturing and caring nature and can be very intuitive. Equally, this is another placement that you can see where the face can kind of fluctuate. It can kind of go from periods of being thinner to being a little bit fuller, and it can literally change like the moon. And I also find that these are people who are generally very, open and make, decisions or actions based off of their moon signs. You're gonna have to take into consideration what sign it's in, but they may be very dynamic with their emotions depending on what sign that moon is placed in. Now, let's say you have Mercury in your first house, right? Because Mercury has connections to communication, business, travel, socializing, learning. So Mercury in the first house is generally somebody who is like a little receiver. They are very communicative and expressive, and they are seen as somebody who's like the broadcaster, right? Or the writer, or somebody who's kind of covering things or, talking about things on a regular basis. Quick thinking, and they have a very sharp wit about them, and also very curious. They enjoy new things, and they can sometimes be a little mischievous as well. Now, Venus in the first house has connections, obviously, to the energies of Taurus and Libra. So Venus being in this house is definitely going to bless you with a sense of beauty and femininity or some kind of like attractiveness. You can be seen as somebody who's very charming or attractive, and you can have a strong sense of style, and you can be very artistic. These are also people who are generally very social and enjoy being around other people. Now, if you have Mars in the first house, this is a very dynamic energy, very energetic and assertive. Mars loves being in this house. These can be people who are very natural when it comes to competition and can generally be very ambitious. They can be impulsive and have a strong desire to take action, and they may find that they need to be physically active and have an outlet to blow off steam. Otherwise, they can be a little temperamental. If you have Jupiter in the first house, because of Jupiter's natural connection both to Sagittarius and Pisces, these people can be very optimistic, and they can have a strong sense of faith and an ever-loving feeling of, adventure. They love travel, they love expanding, and they can actually be quite funny as well, because I think Jupiter's kind of connection to Sagittarius can make them a bit of like a comedian. They're often very philosophical, and they enjoy exploring new ideas and beliefs. So Jupiter being in this house also makes them very insightful, natural teachers, travelers, and they generally tend to be extremely generous and enjoy helping other people. Now, if you have Saturn in your first house and that natural connection to Capricorn or Aquarius, Saturn in the first is usually a very disciplined and responsible person. It can also be somebody who has their guard up a little bit, and they can take a little bit of time to kind of defrost and warm up to you. But generally, they have a strong sense of duty and responsibility. They can be quite cautious and may struggle with self-doubt, but not often do people see that, right? That's usually something that they have to kind of process and work through on their own. But they can be seen as natural leaders, and they can also be seen as somebody who is responsible, and somebody who can definitely provide some sense of guidance or support. And they may be seen as like an authority figure. So I have seen some people who have these placements that are like judges or, cops, or people who are teachers, because Saturn's energy of being like a disciplinarian can kind of play out in your life. Now, if you have Uranus in your first house, right, this is obviously connected traditionally to Aquarius. So Uranus in the first house is an interesting one. This is usually somebody who's very Uranian, very independent and unconventional, a little weird, a little wacky, and they may be somebody who goes through spurts of like needing, to kind of be free. They might be a bit of a rebel with a cause and enjoy going against the grain. And there may be something very unusual about their appearance or their style or their personality. They can often be very innovative and enjoy challenging the status quo, and they can be quite unpredictable and may struggle with commitment. Now, if you have Neptune in your first house, this is an interesting placement because of Neptune's connection to Pisces. This can be somebody who is very creative and imaginative. I see a lot of people who have this that are artists, designers, cinematographers, photographers, sometimes even people who are involved with like modeling. I've seen this placement as well. And it's a very spiritual placement, and it may have a strong connection to the metaphysical. Now, these people can be quite sensitive and sometimes struggle with boundaries. It's likely that they're empathic. They can also be more prone to addiction issues. Sometimes they prefer isolation and being on their own, and they can also be more prone to fluctuating energy levels and sometimes have issues with their physical or mental health. Now, Neptune here can be somebody who is like a natural born intuitive or mystic. That's something else that's very common with this placement, and likely they see the world through rose-colored glasses. And then last but certainly not least, we have Pluto. So when Pluto is in your first house, and Pluto's association traditionally with Scorpio, this is a very intense and passionate person. I always say Pluto in the first house can be like a natural bullshit detector where you can pull, like basically pick up information off of other people and assess whether or not you feel safe or secure with them. You may be able to, read between the lines better than other signs as well. They're often a very transformative, type of individual, and they may experience many changes throughout their life, both in how they look and also where they live. Many Scorpio risings or Pluto on the ascendant feel like they've lived many lifetimes in one life and that they keep shedding their old skin. They can be quite secretive and sometimes may struggle with power dynamics. But Pluto in the first house can be somebody who's incredibly capable of transforming themselves and teaching other people how to do the same. They can be very, very, inquisitive as well. I think Pluto being there can be somebody who's always trying to look into things or doing research. They can be people who kind of carry an intense amount of power within them. And they can be sometimes seen as a little prickly, but generally when you get to know somebody who is Pluto in the first house, you realize that that stems from a lifetime of having to learn how to become more self-sufficient and protect themselves. I hope this gives you guys some more insight on the first house and how the first house works in astrology, as well as your rising sign. I'd love to hear some of your guys' feedback if you resonate with your rising sign as well as planets in the first house. Let me know how it's played out for you. If you guys like this content and you want to see more of it, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned because we'll be doing next month, we'll talk all about Taurus and the archetype of Taurus, as well as the second house in astrology. I'll catch you guys back here tomorrow where I'm going to be doing a live reading. We're going to be doing live tarot readings on the channel, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Join me there. You can join the link in my community tab if you guys want to show up for a reading, and we'll hang out on Friday. Until then, I'll see all of you very soon. Take care.